What if I told you that most people who think they're going against the grain are actually just following a different crowd? Let that sit for a second. Because what used to be considered against the grain, not following the crowd, right? Refusing shortcuts, holding to long standing principles used to make someone a renegade, an outlier. But something has shifted. The culture has flipped. You guys, welcome to the Kingdom Family Movement podcast. I am your host, Sam Velasquez, and I am so excited to be bringing this episode to you because I think it's crucial to where we're at in the season. And it is so important, especially from the context of, right, the Kingdom Family Movement, right? Wanting to reignite marriages, realign the family, and restore the home, right? We can't lose sight of what it means to go against the grain because I do believe it has shifted. And if you are joining for the first time, thank you. I appreciate it. Hey, as always, hey, leave a review. Go ahead, follow the particular channel that we're hosting this on, as well as like it, share it. It helps us grow. It's part of the fun algorithm that we all live in. But to the point of this podcast, hey, only do it if you actually enjoy it, because I don't necessarily want to just grow fast and have people who like something but don't listen. If you truly enjoy this, then do me a favor, share it with a friend, because I think it could benefit them just as much. But to my point about culture, which is a very big, broad word, right? What is culture? And I'm not going to break that down, but I do believe there's been a shift, right? The culture shift. And do I mean now? Well, yes, right? I believe that the world is now celebrating speed and shortcuts, fast tracks, immediate results. See, if you're not moving fast enough, something must be wrong. I was talking to a friend the other day, and I'll try to not get too far down the rabbit hole on this, but it's important because it kind of shows the culture and the pressure that it puts on families at times. This individual was talking about their child who's in sports, and they were concerned about should or shouldn't they do this particular thing involving sports. And I was just listening, but I thought, oh my gosh. And so someone told them, though, that, hey, they better make sure they get them in now because, they need to start developing them. They need to make sure. Now, how old is this child? 11 years old. And that's my point. Culture right now is like, you got to hurry up. You got to go. It's going to be too late. You're going to miss the window of opportunity. If you don't do it, blah, blah, blah. Hold on. Slow down. Pause. Wait a minute. They're 11 years old. And I have an absolute bias towards youth sports and leadership development of our youth when it comes to sports, because I think we've obliterated it in so many different ways. But that is a different podcast and a different show. But for now, my point, though, is that culture, right, for example, will lean in and say, you've got to do this. And if you want them to have the best chance of being in a Division I school, you better get them going at 11 or even sooner. Let's be honest. But that's just not true, right? So in that moment, right, you feel like if you're not moving fast enough, like I said, something must be wrong. If you slow down, you're falling behind. If you pause, you're labeled unproductive. I mean, heaven forbid you actually just take a break. Take a 10 to 15-minute nap, right? Rest your brain and mind and rejuvenate yourself. Don't do that, right? That's laziness. And if someone suggests patience, discipline, or long-term thinking, well, geez, right? That's often called poverty thinking in today's culture. That just blows my mind. And listen, I understand there is a poverty thinking out there. I get it. But let me ask you, is it poverty thinking? Or has the definition of against the grain quietly changed? Because in a fast-paced, algorithm-driven, outcome-based world, and obsessed at that, the real radical act might not be speed. And I think it might be this: pause, seek, ponder, to think deeply before we move and or take action. I know that sounds so radical because we just don't really live in that world anymore. Everything seems to be the opposite of that. And again, if you do pause, you do seek, and you do ponder, and you do think deeply, now you are realizing you're going against the grain. At least that's my argument a little bit. So maybe the real question is, do people even do that anymore? Do we sit long enough with a question? Do we weigh the cost? Do we consider the consequences to test what we're building against truth maybe? Or are we just reacting? Are we just responding to the crowd? Are we just going with the flow? because I do believe this is a reality to a degree. Okay, what once seemed radical, again, moving fast, disrupting everything, chasing new paths, pioneering, which I love, by the way, has now become the norm. It's what everyone's doing. So now the real act of going against the grain, again, my point is, might actually be returning to what was always worked. Return to what has always worked. Go back to the foundation. Because without a firm foundation, everything that we build on or that we try to build will crumble over time. I just think it might be getting back to the foundation. We see this example, right? This idea of going against the grain, maybe in what is now the radical sense of being patient, seeking, pondering, being obedient to what God's actually called you to do on His time, not your timeline. I know that's hard, guilty. But think about Noah. Noah built an ark when there was no rain. That is insane. Who does that, right? Like, okay, no, here's the deal. If you want to go fast and you want to get this done, here's what you need to do. First and foremost, why would you use gopher wood? That's okay. He wasn't listening to the noise. He was being obedient. And to do it when there's no rain, this seems not even logical. So talk about going against the grain. I think there's a pretty good example. But again, he wasn't following culture. He was following God. He was following a firm foundation. What about Daniel? If you know the story of Daniel, right? Daniel in the lion's den, we know that. But Daniel got there because he refused to go with the crowd. He refused to bow. He kept praying when it was illegal. He didn't compromise, even if it cost him everything. And I want to stop there for a minute because what does that mean? You see, because we will sometimes go on the other side of the coin, which is what the flow is now. And that is we'll use something along these lines. It's the cost of no action. We use that term, and I understand principally what we're trying to say. And so instead of thinking about, oh my gosh, if I don't do anything, I'm going to lose so much more. But what Daniel was doing is saying, even though I know what I am going to lose, I'm not going to compromise. So it's saying, even though I know there's a faster route, obedience is telling me this. Even though I know I could get there in a much more effective way and I could make way more money faster, I'm going to be patient, seek and ponder the truth, the foundation of what God is saying to do. I'm going to be obedient. You see, listen, it's not rebellion. That's conviction. And there is such a difference. And we live in a world that will tell us, don't be convicted, don't believe, don't have faith, don't pause and pray and ask God. Here we have the algorithm, the outcome, the guarantee, do this. I get it. It's a very real pressure that exists. And then of course, Jesus is kind of the ultimate example, right? He comes to this earth, to this world that we live in, right? And we expected, I'll say we, because I think a lot of the people in that time, we all expected power, and he had power. Don't get me wrong, but we expected he would use it in our favor. But instead, he didn't. He came with humility. And it's like, wait a minute, this is not the cultural way. Jesus, what are you doing? Right? The world expected him to dominate, to be and have dominance over everything. And instead, what does he do? He comes and he's washing feet. It's kind of like, hey, question, hold on, right? Culturally, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. But it's like, that's not the most effective way to take down a regime and conquer the world, Jesus. Why are you washing feet? How unproductive can we get? And that's gross, by the way. Okay, but that's what the world expected. See, the culture wants to conquer, but Jesus, he came to serve. That is against the grain and still is to this day, but only because the world has drifted so far from the truth. And maybe I have, maybe you have. Right? It's easy to say the world, and then we're like, yeah, they're so far drifted. No, I'm talking about all of us as it pertains to each of us as individuals. So here's maybe my real question for us to contemplate, to think about, to seek, to ponder. Are we actually going against the grain, or are you just going with the flow? Are you just moving with a different version of it? Because the direction doesn't matter if the foundation is unstable. That could be in your marriage, it could be in your parenting, in your work, in your business, in your entrepreneurial journey, in your personal faith, in your church, in the communities you're a part of. It could be anything. And again, direction is kind of irrelevant if the foundation isn't stable. And here's the truth. First, ask yourself this though. What are you standing on? Can you identify that? When everything around you keeps shifting, which it will, where do you find your footing? What are you planting yourself firmly on? Because that is the thing that is going to be the most foundational. And I believe the truth is that the answer isn't culture. It's not trends. It's not speed. It's not what, or sorry, it's not speed. It's in what doesn't change because stuff will always change. Algorithms, feeds, frameworks, right? There's so many things, but at a principle level, they it doesn't change, right? So how do we not get caught up in that? And that's why I'm giving you the principle to practice in the movement today. Very simple. Okay. The first thing is the principle that we're going to live by to make sure we don't get caught up in what is going against the grain. And actually, if you want to go against the grain, then do this. Live by this principle. God does not change. That's the principal truth. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We find that in Hebrews 13, it is the foundational truth in which we're going to principally stand on. God does not change. Everything else, again, will shift. Culture will shift. Our opinions will shift. Systems will shift. Okay. But God will not shift. That is the principle that we're going to live by this week. And when your life is built on Him, your foundation doesn't have to move just because everything else does. And listen, shifts come and go. A shift could be losing a close loved one. A shift could be losing a job. A shift could be so many different things. But God never changes, and He's the foundation that if you put your life on and in, you'll stay rooted, right? So again, because we got to remember peace doesn't come from keeping up. And the temptation to want to keep up is always there. I'm guilty of that. There's been things I've chased and things I've gone after, and with the right motive, but still it costs me something, right? And if it's going to cost me my peace, that's not worth it because that's not foundational. But if I'm in God as the foundation, my peace lies there. So it comes from standing firm in Him, nothing else. So how do we practice that, right? How do we practice the principal truth, which is God never changes and He is a firm foundation? I think one of the best practices we can do is we can practice looking for the root, not the noise. Practice looking for the root. The noise could be so many things: distractions, business opportunities, quicker, faster routes, alternatives, shortcuts, an algorithm, a framework, a challenge. I'm not saying they're bad, right? They serve a purpose. But if I'm putting all of my stock in that as the root, it will fail me. So practice looking for the root. Who is the root? Well, I'm glad you asked. Jesus said this in John 15:5. I am the vine, not me, but He was saying this. I am the vine, you are the branches. That means I'm a branch, you're a branch. And apart from Him, I can do nothing. So unless I'm connected, I'm rooted in Him because He is the root. He is the firm foundation. So practice looking for the root. Practice looking for where God wants to show up in your everyday life throughout the week. Okay. Practice slowing down. And don't just slow down. Better yet, slow down and invite Him in. I'm looking for the root. That's the practice I want to do. It's saying, God, I know you're there, and you invite Him in and you say, I need your help. I know there's a million ways I can do this. I want to do it my way, but your ways are much higher than mine. Help me. And keep the noise out because the temptation to look for a quicker, faster, easier alternative will always be there. But remember, noise is loud, but roots are deep. And life doesn't come from the noise. It comes from connection. It comes from being connected to the vine, just like it says in John 15:5. So how do we take action, right? How do we go from the principal truth, which is God never changes, to practicing, looking for the root, to then the one movement, the thing we take action on? And it's not a big leap from the practice. It's just seek specifically, once you've identified and you've invited the root in, right? You're practicing inviting God into your everyday life. Practice intentionally asking Him to show you the way He wants you to do something, and not casually, not occasionally. And I've been there. I've done things casually and occasionally. So I'm not saying I've mastered it, but be deliberate. Okay. That might look different for everyone, right? We use language like our devotion time, right? That is so important, right? That's the reality. I'm going to stand on God. I'm going to practice seeking Him, and I'm going to take action by asking Him what it is and how it is He wants me to do it. I want His timing, His strategy, His way, and it's all there. We can get it in His Word by reading. We can get it by praying and asking. And maybe an example of something to ask for is, God, help me lead my family. Very simple. Pause before making a massive decision. God, help me to have patience before I try to make something happen that you're asking me to just wait so you can actually do it and not me in my own strength. Imagine that. Because movement doesn't always mean speed. Sometimes the most powerful movement that we can take is just turning back to the foundation. If you want to go against the grain in today's culture, then put your life in the root and stand firm on the truth that God never changes. Live by principle truth of God's word. You want to go against the grain? Do that. See what happens. I want to end kind of with this idea, right? Is remembering that going against the grain doesn't equal rebellion. No, it's about returning. It's about returning to the truth, returning to principle. It's about returning to what is firm, faithful, and proven. Because when my life is rooted in God, in Him, we don't have to chase peace. We can just simply stand in and on it. Hey, and when your home, when my home, when we are building on a firm foundation, everything else begins to align. Because like the truth tells us, if we who labor, okay, unless we let God build the house, unless we are rooted in Him, if He is not the vine and we be the branches, it says that whatever we're building it in vain, which just means it's for nothing. And we don't want that. So here's my challenge. Go against the grain this week by rooting yourself back in the foundational truth of God's word, standing firm on the truth and the principle that God never changes. Practice seeking Him, finding the root, knowing His truth, and then take action by moving in a direction, by asking Him exactly what it is He wants you to do in your marriage, in your family, in your home, in your business, as an entrepreneur, as a pastor, as a leader, as a speaker, as a coach, whatever it may be. Put your faith and trust in Him. He is the foundation. That's going against the grain in today's culture. Pause, seek, pray, be patient. God's timing is perfect. You guys, I appreciate you tuning in. Listen, if you want the principle, the practice, and the movement sent to you every single Monday to your inbox for free, do me a favor. Click the link below in the show notes. It's there. Every single Monday, I put out a very specific, not always matching the podcast, but just principle, practice, and movement you can take every single week into your family, into your marriage, into your home, so you can begin to build a stronger foundation. You guys, I appreciate you. We'll see you on the other side. Peace.